Okay, so we are looking at a map of what is Magna Graecia, which is basically that translates to Greater Greece. And we're going to talk about Syracuse. Actually, first of all, I'm coming from Tuscany, so that little pink dot right here at the top of Italy, up in the central part of Italy, that's where I'm coming from. And I'm sitting in my kitchen right now. And we're going to hop down to Syracuse, which is in the southeast corner of Sicily. So to put Syracuse in context, we're looking at this map of the ancient world, the Mediterranean basin in about 740 BC. And this is Magna Graecia, or Greater Greece. So Greece, what we call Greece today, was actually a collection of city-states over here on the mainland, the Peloponnesus, and this group of islands here in the Aegean. And at a certain point, they started they had a very active colonization program. They colonized the Eastern Mediterranean first, and then in about 740, they started to colonize the Western Mediterranean. So what they're doing is they're taking over the known world is what they're doing. They're controlling trade in the Mediterranean. This is the known world. This is obviously well before the New World was known, and I think even before the Silk Road was founded. So this is the world, and of course where Western democracy kind of got its start. So the city-states here in the Peloponnesus and the islands in the Aegean Sea, each city-state would send out groups of colonizers, and they would set up cities and basically copying what they knew at home. So they brought with them farmers, government officials, there was a leader, there were artists. They really recreated what they knew at home. So they weren't just camping out, they were recreating Greek civilization. So the city-state of Corinth, this map is in Spanish, so it says Corinto right here. The city-state of Corinth sent out an expedition to found Syracuse in 734 BC. And that's the beginning of Siracusa. So let's take a look then at the greater Mediterranean. Notice that Carthage is here. So the Greeks are moving through and setting up these colonies all throughout the Mediterranean basin, but notice there aren't any right here. So Carthage was settled by the Phoenicians. They are a mighty, mighty maritime power. They came out of Syria, most likely. They're a little bit enigmatic, but they were this mighty, mighty maritime power and started setting up fortified ports throughout the Mediterranean in 1500 BC. So obviously they're not too happy about Greece taking over the world here. So on Sicily in particular, this is what the situation looks like. The colonies that were founded by Greece on the East Coast, Syracuse and Naxos, were founded almost contemporaneously. They kind of argue back and forth which one was founded first. It was either Naxos or Syracuse around 734 BC. Then they founded Catania, Catane, and Zancle, which is Messina, and various sub-colonies. So you can see what they're doing. These original colonies are founding sub-colonies, and they're basically practicing what we call manifest destiny. They are heading west, and they're kind of doing whatever it takes to control all the territory of the island of Sicily. Sicily is the biggest island in the Mediterranean, so that was kind of a big deal. They plowed over the native populations, the Sicani and the Siculi, who did put up some resistance, particularly in this area down here, but they were overcome by the Greeks. And then the Greeks hit the Carthaginian, basically, territory. So look at Imera on the north coast. Next thing you have is Solunto and Palermo, which were two of these fortified ports of the Carthaginians. And then on the south coast, they proceeded over to Selinunte, and didn't make it any further because the Carthaginians, who have fortified ports at Lilybeo, which is Marsala, and Mozia, were having none of it. So there was lots of battling for territory here, lots of power struggle, very, very delicate balance of power as well. And so the Greeks are trying to move across, the Carthaginians are trying to maintain their territory, and it is extreme warfare. Rome gets involved at a certain point, and you end up with the Punic Wars. Most of them were fought here on the island of Sicily. So that lasted from about 264 to 146 BC. And the end result of this is that, of course, Rome, the balance sort of shifts towards Rome, and Rome literally takes over and establishes the Roman Empire, which then goes on as such a strong force for several more centuries. So let's zero in on Syracuse. Syracuse, before Rome took over, while the Greek colonies were still kind of going strong, Syracuse in its heyday was actually the power of the Western Mediterranean. And they got to the point where they actually rivaled Athens as the largest, most beautiful, most populous, wealthiest, and most powerful city of Magna Graecia. Athens did not take this kindly at all. So the original city-states in Greece had no intention of letting their upstart colonies surpass them. But that's exactly what happened with Syracuse. This is the island of Ortygia. I'll come back to this in a second. This is what it looks like from the air. So in 415 BC, Athens said, enough of this. You know, you're this upstart colony, we're going to go over there and squash them. They sent their armada over to Syracuse, and Syracuse won. Syracuse sent them packing. Not only that, they actually sunk the armada. The entire Athenian armada was sunk here in Porto Grande, where you see these boats, the big port over here. So that gives you an idea really of the wealth and power of Syracuse. And so much of that still exists today, and it exists sort of in this palimpsest of layers of history. So we're going to visit and Syracuse and kind of get into that to see some of that. So here's what the city looks like. It's this tiny little island called Ortygia, and then the mainland. So the island of Ortygia was the original Greek settlement. They settled here. You can see it's got walls. Those black lines around the island represent the defensive walls. So they were able to defend it. It's kind of up on a bluff. They found these two wonderful ports, Porto Grande at the bottom and Porto Piccolo, the small port up at the top. And there were also natural freshwater springs here. So that's kind of what drew the Greeks, the Corinthian settlers to this spot. So they chose to set up shop here on Ortygia. And the first thing they did was to build their citadel or acropolis right here in this spot. This is the highest point on Ortygia. So this is the Greek citadel. And there was government buildings here as well as sacred spaces for worship, so temples. And then the city expanded out with commercial and residential neighborhoods and expanded even into the mainland. So they now call this Neopolis. This is the new part of the city. So in the 6th century BC, the Greek theater is built right here, and lots of temples and altars for public sacrifice. When the Romans came in, the city was still going strong. Really, the Romans pummeled them, but they managed to keep going. The Romans built an amphitheater here, just like the Colosseum. And then they also began, that's in the 1st century AD, so 800 years after the founding of this town. And then the Romans in the 3rd century AD started some catacombs. So there is so much to talk about here. Like we said, when we went to Naples 2 or 3 weeks ago, I cannot even scratch the surface. So I'm going to talk to y'all about 2 things that I find really interesting about Syracuse. And I'm well aware of everything I'm leaving out, and I can't stand it. So when y'all come visit, we'll go really in depth and see all of it. So today we're going to kind of talk about two main things. I am going to show you a couple of photos of Neopolis, that sort of the new part of town, before we go into Ortygia. So again, here we are, Syracuse. Ortygia is the island, and then Neopolis is this part you see in the kind of in the background. So go into Neopolis, and there's the Archaeological Park of Syracuse. And the ruins, they're kind of knee-high. And what you're looking at here on the left are 2 structures from the Greek world. The 2 columns are what's left of a very, very large temple to Zeus, a Doric temple to Zeus. And then an altar that was hewn out of the rock. It's not a rock that was put down, it was actually carved out of the rock. This is this corner, southeast Sicily is this kind of limestone plateau. So you can see that's why all this stone is so white. This was the largest public altar in the Greek world, built in 240 BC. And then on the right, you see the 2 Roman structures I just mentioned, the amphitheater, which is like the Colosseum, and then those catacombs, which were started in the 3rd century AD, and we're going to come back to this in a minute. And now here's the Greek theater. 6th century BC, there was the original theater in the 6th century, built most likely out of wood. A lot of these original structures of the original settlement were either built out of wood or perhaps stone, but very small. So as the city grew in wealth and power and population, they had to rebuild them. So in the 5th century, they, again, hewn out of the rock, this enormous theater. Some of the upper registers of seats are being encroached on by the hillside, but it sat 15,000 people. Again, that is the largest theater in the Greek world, enormous, and it's still being used today. And you can see that these theaters, the Greek theaters, all have excellent acoustics, and you can see how the stage is set up with no, what's the word? Proscenium, I think is the word. The Romans used a stage set with columns and balconies and pretty stuff. The Greeks did not do that. The Greeks let the natural background be the background. So in this case, it's that kind of green area with the sea in the back. So Syracuse was not only a military power, it was also a center of culture and learning. Plato, the Athenian philosopher, came to Syracuse 3 times. He visited here on purpose to try to share some Republican ideals with the tyrants of Syracuse and actually get anywhere with that, but he tried. Aeschylus was here. The tyrants invited Aeschylus. He was invited to premiere, he's the playwright. He wrote The Women of Aetna, The Persians. There's a list of plays. I'm sorry, they're not coming to mind right now. He actually premiered his plays in the theater in Syracuse. So we know Aeschylus as the father of Greek tragedy. Well, several of those tragedies premiered in Sicily. And then Archimedes, who is known as the great Greek thinker, mathematician, physicist, engineer, inventor, astronomer. He was actually born in Syracuse. So he is a native son of Syracuse. And he invented things like the pulley, the screw pump. He calculated pi. He figured out how to mathematically calculate the principle of the lever. He can show you how that works in math. He discovered the geometrical calculation for the area of a sphere. He designed war machines. He's the guy who figured out that a floating object displaces its own weight in water. So he was this amazing thinker. He was famous in his own lifetime, and he wrote treatises, and the governments were aware of him. He was designing all these war machines. So in 212 BC, Rome, who's now on the scene down here, sieged Syracuse and was pummeling them, and orders were given to the Roman army to not harm Archimedes. Unfortunately, somebody didn't get the word, and a Roman soldier killed Archimedes. So in 212 BC, he was killed accidentally by a Roman soldier. All right, let's jump into Ortygia. Again, here's the view from the water, and also down here at the bottom, a view from the mainland. You can see that there are 2 bridges here that connect the island of Ortygia to the mainland. In ancient times, there was a causeway here. So when you go over the causeway or the bridge, which is this bridge, you can see that on the left-hand part of this image, you end up on the island of Ortygia, and you're met with this. So you're immediately in this palimpsest of layers of history. And all of Sicily is like that. A lot of Italy is like that. Sicily is in particular like that. And it always makes me think of Faulkner. I think there was a Faulkner quote that said, the past never passed. The past is never past because it's right there. So when you're in Syracuse, you're parking your car next to the Temple of Apollo. So this is what is left of this temple to Apollo that was built in 565 BC. And this is the oldest temple in Syracuse and one of the oldest temples in Sicily as well. Again, there was probably an earlier temple here, perhaps even a structure made out of wood and reeds. And when they decided to put up sort of the bigger and better, long-lasting stone version, this is what they put in. So again, the architects either came from Greece with these expeditions, or these guys were traveling back and forth. They seem to be moving around a lot, and artistically, they're very much in touch. So the building techniques and methods are the same all over the Mediterranean basin. So this is a Doric temple. It's peripteral, which means it's got this one row of columns. I have to get rid of some of my Hollywood squares because I can't see everybody. Hang on a second, I can't see my slides. There we go. So it's peripteral and hexastyle, which means it's got 6 columns across the short side. And then on the interior, there is this space called the cella, which is where the cult statue was kept. And you get in there by going through this pronaos with these 2 little columns in antis. We're going to see this over and over again. So this was not just tossed up here because they thought this was a good idea for a temple. There was an architectural canon that these guys were following. So here's Selinonte. This is the Temple C. It's called Temple C at Selinunte. We know the temple to Apollo in Syracuse is to Apollo because there's an inscription that says so. This, they assume is to Apollo, dedicated to Apollo, but they're not sure. So it's referred to as Temple C. It's in the Acropolis at Selinunte, which is that the subcolony that was founded the farthest west on the southwest coast. So here you see this Doric temple built literally at the same time period as the temple to Apollo, exact same floor plan. Only thing that's missing are those two little columns in Antis here at the pronaos. And I'm going to use this as an example of the idea of decorating temples. In Greece proper, temples were heavily, heavily decorated with sculptural decoration. Lorenzo, mi senti? No.
Sì, ti sento, sì, ti sento.
C'hai un microfono aperto, se potresti chiudere, non so se lo vedi. Grazie. Allora, so the temples in Sicily were generally not decorated with sculptural decorations. Temple C is an anomaly. It's the only temple, the only Greek temple on Sicily that had sculptural decoration. And this is an example of two of the Metapiece from the Temple of Apollo. The Metapiece are these square pieces that go in between the triglyphs, which are those three lines. And you can see over here on the right, a block of stone that's actually a piece of a triglyph that has fallen down. There was an earthquake here in Selinunte, that's why there's so much rubble here. So what you can see on that is, there are these little dentae, which I love, these little teeth. They're right under here, right under the triglyphs. And you can also see that bit of red. These temples were painted. So while the temples here in Sicily didn't have sculpture like the Greek temples in Greece do, they were painted. All temples in the Greek world were painted, and they were extremely bright. So here you can see remnants of the kind of red paint, and then over here, whitewash. You can see bits of whitewash are still left on the columns. So when they use local stone, if it wasn't pure white marble, well, then they just whitewashed it because that thing needed to be white. And in the case of Selinunte, it needed to be white because people from sea could actually see it. And Selinunte wanted to make a statement because they were on that contested land over there in the west with Carthage and Greece. Selinunte wanted to make a big statement to anybody who was coming in from the sea. So going back to Syracuse, here's the temple to Apollo, and this is what it would have looked like. This is conjecture for the most part, but they do know what colors were used, and they know what, for example, these roof tiles looked like. Bits and pieces of that were found around the base of these temples. So this is how the Temple of Apollo looks back in the day. Moving on into Syracuse, if you park your car there at Apollo, you can walk into the lovely 19th century Piazza of Archimedes, and then you just jump into these just twisting tiny little lanes of the Greek urban plan. So the urban plan of Ortygia follows the Greek layout. And there are these beautiful tiny little lanes that pop out onto these boardwalks, which are actually, they're on top of the defensive wall. So it's quite a lovely place to visit. Lots of cafes and sunsets and aperitivi and whatnot. The architecture, when you're walking around town, is heavily Baroque. There was a massive earthquake in 1693 that shook all of southeast Sicily, after which point they had to do a very large rebuilding. So there was this rebuilding boom that took place in the early 1700s. And of course, Baroque architecture was what was being done at that time. So you see lots of Baroque details as you're walking around. This is the area called the Giudecca, still in those old Greek streets. This is where the Jewish community lived. There was a strong Jewish community here, thriving Jewish community up until 1492, when the Spanish crown, which included Sicily, the Jews were expelled. The synagogue on Ortygia was turned into a church called San Giovinello, which you can see down there at the bottom. There are some other remains of Jewish Syracuse, which you can visit. And then walking through these streets, you pop out into this lovely piazza. This is one of the most beautiful piazzas in Italy. And it's big, huge open space, very bright, use of that white local stone. This is the main piazza in town. It's also on the location of the Greek Acropolis. So here we are on the Acropolis, and we're in the main piazza, which means we also have the Duomo, the cathedral. So here's the cathedral to Syracuse. It's dedicated to the Virgin Mary. And it has this wonderful, exuberant Sicilian Baroque facade. It's got that kind of very, the architrave that's kind of in and out, those freestanding columns. There's lots of movement, the broken pediments, those squat little volutes on the side. Beautiful, beautiful example of Sicilian Baroque architecture. And it is indeed a facade. It's on the front of an older building. So to get an idea of what this facade is on the front of, take a look at the side of the building. There's so many layers here, it's incredible. First thing you notice, I think, are these battlements. These are 11th century Norman battlements. And then right underneath that, check out this row of columns. There's a row of Doric columns. So what we're looking at is the temple to Athena that has been transformed into a church. The church was not built on top of the temple to Athena. That happens a lot. Not in this case. In this case, the temple was transformed into a church. If you're in the church, you're actually in the temple. This is what the temple looked like. So that typical Doric temple, like we've just been looking at, this is 100 years later, 100 years after Temple C and after Apollo. This is dedicated to Athena. There was a smaller building on this site after a huge victory in 480 BC. Syracuse and Agrigento teamed up to crush the Carthaginians at Imera, and this is how Syracuse celebrated. They minted a gold coin with Athena on the front and Nike, the winged victory, on the back, and they built a new temple to Athena. So 100 years later, we've still got this peripteral hexa-style temple. The only major change here is that they have added this Opisthedomus, which is a place for votive offerings. But we're still working with the Doric style. And again, all over Magna Graecia, you're seeing the same thing. Here is Selinunte again, Temple E at Selinunte, 470 BC. The Temple of Zeus at Olympia in Greece proper, 470 BC as well, exact same floor plans. Concordia at Agrigento. Some of y'all may have been to Agrigento. That's usually kind of one of the stops you make when you're in Sicily. This is just slightly later, 430 BC. And same floor plan. And this one is in such good shape because it was also transformed into a church. So these pagan buildings, when they were abandoned after thousands of years, crumbled into rubble unless they were inhabited. So this was used as a church, which actually preserved it. It's no longer a church today. Whereas in Syracuse, the building was preserved because it was used as a church, and it's still in use today. So what you're looking at here, you've got on the right a reconstruction that's been projected as a light show kind of onto the present day facade, so you can kind of see what that temple looked like in that space. And then you can see the floor plan. So the 470 BC Greek temple has the red footprint, and then the current building you can see drawn around it in black. So the story of this building is just incredible. There was actually a wooden hut here in the 8th century BC. That was sort of the first place of worship. Then there was a small temple. Then there was the grand temple to Athena that we've just looked at. The temple was transformed into a church very, very early on, as early as the 600s AD even. St. Paul came from the Holy Land and brought Christianity into Syracuse at that major port. Don't forget about the port in Syracuse. So there's lots of coming and going. That's how Christianity came into this part of the world. So it was actually turned into a Catholic church quite early on. In the 11th century, the Normans came through here and put their stamp on this church. They put those battlements on, and they put a facade on as well. The Norman facade fell down in the 1693 earthquake, and so now we have this 1725 really exuberant Sicilian Baroque facade. So the layers just in this one building are incredible. Just take a look at the side of the building. You really can see how those columns stand out. And just in this one little snapshot right here, you have the juxtaposition of 470 BC Greek columns, 11th century AD Norman battlements, and then the very movimentato 1725 AD Sicilian Baroque facade. The interior is spectacular as well. You can see that they just closed up the space between the columns to make the exterior wall. And then remember the cella where the cult statue goes? Those are solid walls to make the cella on the interior. Well, they have punched through arches through the cella, so that you can have what looks like a regular kind of basilica plan with a nave and 2 side aisles. And then as you turn around to walk out of the church, you're, in case you forgot where you were, you're reminded very quickly that you are in the middle of a Greek temple, and you walk out between those 2 columns. Really amazing. So also in this church, this is the effigy, the statue to the patron saint of Syracuse, and she is Saint Lucy, and she was a Christian martyr. She died here in Syracuse on 13 December 304 AD, and her feast day is celebrated every 13th of December. So she actually spends most of the year inside this cabinet. As you can see, the cabinet's open here to give a view of her, and you can see her, she's carrying her attributes as well. She has the martyr's palm. She has the dagger literally in her neck. It kind of goes all the way through. It's really gory. And then she's holding a little plate with eyes on it. She's the patron saint of Syracuse. She's also the patron saint of light, vision, and eyesight. So she's carrying a flame for light and then the 2 eyes on a plate. Whenever you see Saint Lucy, she has a plate with 2 eyes on it. So they parade her around town on her feast day of 13 December, take her out of her cabinet, out of the church, parade her around town. And then she comes back to the church here in the piazza. So the church at the far end of the piazza is actually dedicated to Saint Lucy, and there is an altarpiece of the burial of Saint Lucy that was painted by Caravaggio. So we're going to jump up several centuries, and we're going to talk about Caravaggio. For those of you who were here 2 weeks ago, when we talked about Naples, we talked about Caravaggio and his activity in Naples. So we're going to kind of finish that up. Here's Caravaggio. Again, his influence was huge. He had a very short career in that he died at age 38, but his influence on the history of Western art was so huge that they've even put his portrait on the old 100,000 lira note. And then on the right, you can see his self-portrait. So he was a very particular artist. He was kind of precocious. He created an amazing body of work and an amazing group of followers that went on for centuries. At a very young age, he managed to accomplish all of this. However, he was kind of suffering inner turmoil. And you can see here on the right, this is the David and Goliath dating to 1609. It's in the Borghese Gallery in Rome. And Caravaggio has depicted himself as the decapitated head of David. So he's on the run at this point. Caravaggio went to Naples. He was escaping Rome because he had a murder charge. He actually had been sentenced to execution. So he was facing a possible decapitation of his own. He was constantly getting into trouble. It seems that the murder was actually, he won a duel. It was sort of a fight of honor. And while he won the duel, he ended up on the lam basically for the rest of his life. So he fled to Naples. He's trying to figure out how to get back to Rome. And he goes to Malta. He decides, okay, if I go to Malta, I can join the Knights of Malta and my record will be expunged. So he does that. He gets in trouble in Malta as well. He has a fight with one of the Knights of Malta who's of a superior rank to him. He ends up in jail and somehow gets out. He's been helped along by patrons the whole way. His wealthy patrons are sort of making sure that he has work everywhere he goes, and they protect him. They got him out of Rome. They got him to Naples. They got him commissions. Same thing in Malta. He escapes from Malta and he comes to Syracuse because he has a friend in Syracuse, and his friend is Mario Minetti. So here is, years earlier, Caravaggio painted a portrait of his friend Mario. They were both artists up in the north, and this is a young Caravaggio. He's painting still lifes predominantly. In the first studio where he worked, his job was still lifes and faces. So here's this amazing still life, and then you get this kind of crazy Caravaggio-esque composition. We're not really sure what's going on. We're not sure who this was painted for. It almost looks like Caravaggio painted it for himself. His friend Mario Minetti is the model. He's kind of taken, sort of seductively taken his shirt off his shoulder. He's got that little coquettish flower behind his ear. And if you look carefully, he's being bitten by a lizard, which is so kind of absurd because I don't think lizard bites really hurt. And this boy is just, recoiling from his lizard bite. So it's very bizarre painting. But these guys were tight friends. And when Caravaggio needed some help he was in Malta and he needed to get the hell out of there, he called Mario Minetti, wrote to Mario Minetti and said, can I please come to Syracuse? And Mario said, yes, come on to Syracuse. So Mario took Caravaggio in and got him a commission to paint the burial of St. Lucy. So here's Caravaggio's Burial of St. Lucy. The saint has been knifed in the neck. She's being buried, and she's most likely, it looks like, in the catacombs of Syracuse. In 304 AD, when St. Lucy was killed, these catacombs were already in use. So Caravaggio, when he's walking around Syracuse, not hiding away, really, he's out and about. And we know that he went to study all of the ruins, and we know that he went to the catacombs. So it looks to me like this background, very neutral Caravaggesque background, but it seems to be that art just really looks like it came out of the catacombs. So you have your typical Caravaggesque composition with the neutral background, lots of background, very, very dramatic, extreme light and shade, and those wonderful grave diggers up front, which they almost look kind of contemporary to me, but he's used these huge burly grave diggers to kind of, in a way, they're not really, they're blocking us out of the scene, but they're also kind of focusing our gaze in on where it needs to be, which is Santa Lucia on the ground. And you can see on the right, she's got her neck wound, which again, Caravaggio must have known a lot about that by this point. He had been involved in several knife fights that we know about. And again, he's facing this murder charge and is worried that that's going to be his fate. In fact, I'm going to do this really quickly. I don't want to go too long, and I'm already going over, so I'm going to whiz through here. This is what he painted in Malta. It is the beheading of St. John the Baptist. Remember, Salome asked for the head of St. John on a platter. So here is St. John has been taken out of the prison cell. They're actually beheading St. John, and the servant girl is there with her platter ready to receive the head. So Caravaggio, whose name is in fact Michelangelo, his name is Michelangelo Merisi. This is the only painting he ever signed, and he signed it. Here's a detail of the head of the Baptist coming off, the moment of beheading. Michelangelo Merisi, Caravaggio, signed the painting in the blood of the Baptist. So you can't really get any more gory than that. And it really shows you that he was certainly focusing on the fact that this might be his own fate. So to end on a more happy note, he got another commission in Sicily, and well, let's say hopeful note, because it really wasn't, in the end, it wasn't a happy story. He didn't have a good outcome, but he got a commission to go to Messina and paint the Raising of Lazarus. And that's what you're looking at here. The Christ's voice and the light emanating from Christ, full of grace, is literally bringing Lazarus back from the dead. Look at Lazarus's right palm. So Lazarus's body, he was being lowered down into a tomb. He's kind of starting to wake up. His body is still limp, and his arms, he's kind of coming to life with his arms and hands like this. And that right palm is receiving the light of Christ like that. Just amazing. And if you look at it, that's the center of the painting. Amazing, amazing image. Another thing that Caravaggio did here is that he repeated the figure of Christ. He literally did a mirror image of the figure of Christ that he painted in his breakthrough painting in Rome, 1600. He painted the Calling of St. Matthew in the church of San Luigi dei Francesi in the Concordia chapel. And this was his breakthrough painting. So he's taken the image of Christ who's pointing like this. He's pointing to St. Matthew on the left, and then on the right, and then on the left, he's pointing to Lazarus, and he's raising Lazarus from the dead. So it's interesting to see how he treated these two visions of Christ, which are actually quite similar, but they're also different. If you just look at the brushwork, the way that his brushwork has changed is amazing. The fine little detail that he was using to paint those still lives is no longer there. He has got these just very broad, kind of quick brush strokes, but super, super effective here. So here's a close-up again of the figures of the Raising of Lazarus. So here's Lazarus's palm is in full light of Christ. And there's another figure, and here's the hopeful bit. There's another figure that is receiving the light of Christ, and it's this figure right here. His hands are clasped, and he's looking at Christ, and his face is lit up, and that is, in fact, another self-portrait of Caravaggio. So I like to think, anyway, he felt better on the inside. He did get a papal pardon, and he stopped through Naples, found out about the papal pardon, headed back up to Rome, and unfortunately died on the beach. He was wounded. His rival in Malta actually sent out his cronies. He was involved in another knife fight, so he had this knife wound. They think he had lead poisoning from the paint that he was using. So he was ill and injured, and he died on the beach. as his ship landed in Tuscany, and he never made it back to receive his pardon. So unfortunately, Michelangelo Merisi Caravaggio passed away at a young age, but he left so many wonderful canvases for us. He's a very, very prolific painter. So here we are back at the church of Santa Lucia Alabadia, and it's this great Baroque building with those lovely little twirly columns plopped down in the Greek Acropolis. So just think about those layers when we make caponata, which we're about to do. Here's the list of ingredients we're going to use. So caponata is a really quintessential Sicilian summertime dish, and it's made with, it's just include the layers of history that we just talked about are included in here. Some of the ingredients like vinegar and honey were used in the ancient period. Eggplant were brought in by the Saracens in the 9th century AD. Chocolate and tomatoes, for that matter, were brought over from the New World after Christopher Columbus landed in the Americas. So those are included here as well. So I've done a little prep work for y'all today. Let me stop sharing my screen.
Abbassa un po', ok.
Sì.
Abbassa un po'? Sì,
No,
leggermente.
vero. Aspetta che mi voglio vedere.
Abbassa e girala un po' più verso il lavandino. Ok, perfetto, così.
Va bene così, no?
Perfetto, sì.
Okay, so we're going to make eggplant caponata. If y'all have any questions, y'all feel free to unmute your microphone and.
Elaine?
Yeah.
Elaine, two things. The bronze from your first presentation, was that anywhere near where the Athenian Armada was sunk?
No, other side of the island.
Other side.
Other
Okay.
side of the island.
And another little thing where, since you quoted or you referenced Faulkner, I've got a little E.E. Cummings poem for you. It's very simple. It's "Ode to be a Metapiece now that trigger lifts are here." Or you could reverse it, "Ode to be a trigger lift now that Metapiece are here."
Always a favorite.
There you go.
Gotta love your trigger lifts and Metapiece.
There you go.
Thank you for that. All right, so we're gonna make caponata. I've gotten a head start, and the base of this dish is chopped up vegetables is what it is. So we're starting out with celery, onions, and carrots. Nothing bizarre, nothing hard to come by. And you just cook them in some olive oil until the celery and carrots get soft. And that takes a while, so I did it ahead of time. So that's been done. Y'all saw that list of ingredients. There's a lot going on in this dish. Layers and layers and layers of flavor. So the main components though are vegetables and then some little flavorings that we'll add in a minute. So the main vegetable is eggplant, and I'm going to show y'all kind of how to work with that. One second, I'm going to show you some of the eggplant that I've been using. So these are the eggplants that I've used. So I get my vegetable growers plant the regular old eggplant. These ones, kind of stripedy ones, these are called Tunisian eggplant. Both of these have a very light, very compact pulp. This is very common in Sicily. You might find this, you find this all over Sicily. This is probably what they use to make their caponata. And then these little cute ones, which I just think are so pretty. So here they are. So I have soaked the eggplant under salt. I've cut it up into pieces. Can you see that here? I'll move it a little bit closer. So I've cut the eggplant up into chunks and I've let it sit under salt. And just to see what that does, if you're tempted to skip that step, this is how much liquid came out of the eggplant. Look at it. Isn't that crazy? Just this little bit of eggplant. So it's been sitting under salt. So what I need to do then is rinse the salt off. So before I fry the eggplant, I'm going to rinse the salt off.
Elaine, are you leaving the skin on?
Yes, I actually think that's the best part. And so I leave it on. Sometimes you can actually peel it in stripes, take a vegetable peel, or if you don't want that much skin, and just peel off maybe every other section and leave some skin. And if you don't like it, you can peel the whole thing. I actually love the skin, and I leave it on. So I'm rinsing off the salt and just kind of squeezing these things out, and then you're going to press out as much liquid as possible with the dishcloth. This recipe is, it's not hard, but it's a little bit laborious because of all of the chopping, and then there's various cooking times, and you know, you cook things 3 different times. So I usually, when I make this, I make a lot. And so I'm making actually a big, huge double batch. And you can put it up and you can can it and have it all winter long. It's great.
Elaine,
Uh-huh.
this is Marlene in Georgia.
Hey.
Hi. I remember helping my mother squeeze the eggplant when she would make
really?
pickled eggplant. Yeah.
What was she making with it?
You mean what else was she putting in there?
What was she making caponata, or what was she making with her eggplant?
No, she was canning it.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, the pickled eggplant, she would just can it.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Right. Oh, I love that. That's so good.
Yeah.
Elaine, can it be frozen?
I don't know about that. I have a feeling that I've never done that. I think the eggplant would.
Would either. I thought I'd ask. If you make a big batch.
Yeah, I think that the eggplant would maybe create liquid, which would not.
It would. Then how long does it last in the fridge?
It'll last. I'm probably a week in the fridge. And it's got all this olive oil and vinegar in it, and then if you can it, it'll last, you know, until, you know, you can eat it all winter long, really. So I'm going to start the eggplant frying over here. So the eggplant fries separately, and then everything else is done in this pan. So these are obviously, I'm just heating this back up, and then I'm going to get the eggplant going. And they'll drink a lot of olive oil, and then they'll release it. And I'm trying not to, I'm not going to deep fry it. And I'm trying to use basically a smallish amount of olive oil. So I'm using a nonstick pan because that helps. And if you wanted to make it sort of more dietetic, you could probably cook the eggplant in the oven. But I prefer to just do it.
Are you starting with a cold pan for any reason?
Cold pan. I think you always start with the cold pan. I always start with the cold pan. And then warm everything up together. And so the eggplant is now absorbing, it's kind of a sponge, just absorbing a ton of olive oil, and it's going to spit the oil back out. And then before we put the eggplant into the other mixture, we're going to drain it on paper towel. So get some of that oil out of there. So to the chopped up carrot, celery, and onions, I'm going to add tomatoes that I've chopped up. And this is going to cook down.
And that's just the sofrito with the tomato added, is that right?
Yes, and this is not, I don't know, Lorenzo, si può chiamare soffritto questo? Sono pezzi grossi.
No, it's not a soffritto. Soffritto is with the little, very thin pieces, yeah.
So this is not a sofrito because the pieces are bigger, and that's kind of the point of this dish. A lot of times you do start a recipe with a sofrito, a very, very finely chopped onion, carrot, and celery, and that just kind of gives you an underlying flavor. They're actually participating in the dish. You get chunks of celery in here and chunks of carrot. So it's not really called, it's not technically a sofrito, but that is what.
I think we call stufate.
Oh, see, okay.
A big sofrito.
No, it's better verdure stufate.
In fact, okay. So these are like basically stewed vegetables. So
did you peel the tomatoes or not?
No, I did not peel the tomatoes.
Okay.
Put in the peels. So everything, as y'all can see, is chopped up pretty big, and that actually kind of alludes to the name of this dish, which is called caponata. And where that name comes from is debated all over the place. And I originally heard that it was, the dish was originally made, the aristocratic version was made with fish. But the sort of farmer folks who don't have that much money in Sicily couldn't afford to use the fish, and so they used eggplant, and that's where this dish came from. And the fish apparently was called capone. So it was called caponata because it was kind of a sweet and sour fish vegetable thing. Recently I learned, and I actually like this better, the word caponata really might have come from a Greek word, which I think is kaptos, which means chopped. So everything is chopped up into similar sized pieces. And Sicilians use this word in their dialect, and their dialect comes, they have Arabic words in their dialect, French words, They have American words, even English words. They actually use the word mosquito, which cracks me up. And they use a word that is capuliatu, and that it means chopped. So things that are chopped are captoed. So capuliatu, I've heard that used with to refer to ground meat. And I've also seen it used to refer to a little mixture of chopped sun-dried tomatoes and capers, and with some olive oil that's kind of used as a little kind of a sauce on a crostino, just kind of as a little snack. And the idea that perhaps the word caponata actually came from captos makes a lot of sense to me. So I spent all day chopping. So I'm like, yeah, it's captos, it's caponata. So this is going to cook down. The tomatoes are releasing their liquid. The eggplant's coming along. The eggplant's going to get kind of golden and almost crispy.
Did you season the tomato mixture at all, Elaine?
No, but I'm about to add a bunch of flavorings. So that's just tomatoes. I did put some salt in. There's some salt in here. So I'm going to add some flavorings. The first thing I'm going to add is cinnamon. I have a little cinnamon stick. I get really good farm fresh tomatoes. They were picked the day I got them, probably ripened on the vine, but they cannot approach the flavor of Sicilian tomatoes. There's something just about the earth and the sun in Sicily that produces vegetables that just have flavor that you can't find anywhere else. And the tomato down there is kind of spicy to me. And so I'm going to add a little bit of cinnamon just to kind of try and approach that great, deep, kind of spicy flavor of the Sicilian tomatoes. And it doesn't take much. You don't really want to taste the cinnamon in this recipe. Not that there's anything wrong with cinnamon, but it just kind of gives it an underlying richness.
Elaine, do you have the cinnamon in the recipe that you're going to give us?
Yes, I do. I do.
And you were grating a whole cinnamon stick. Are you using like a nutmeg grater, or is there such a thing as just a cinnamon grater?
This is a microplane.
A micro. Oh, okay. I couldn't see. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I need to.
No, that's fine.
I need to improve my camera situation.
No, you're great. I just had wondered what more gadget.
All of these ingredients. So we added a little bit of cinnamon. I'm gonna stir that around to get these going. So I'm really trying to just concentrate this, and I would probably have this on a little bit lower if I weren't going over, and I don't want to keep y'all here all day. So I'm really just kind of torching the caponata to try and get the liquid to reduce a little bit. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit. So I've added the cinnamon. There's some salt in there. I'm adding some hot red pepper that I've already chopped up, just little tiny. These are super hot too, so I didn't add very much. Just a little bit of that. Capers. These are salt-packed capers. I just kind of shook off the salt. I did not rinse them. I'm happy with some salt, so in they go. Olives, big juicy green olives, meaty that is. So all these flavors really come together, and this is one of those recipes that tomorrow it's even better. Once it's had a chance to really, for all those flavors to meld.
Elaine, would Castelvetrano olives work?
Yes, in fact, that may be what these are. I didn't ask when I bought them.
Okay.
This looks like Castelvetrano olives because there's big fat, kind of meaty green olives. They're not Cerignola. I think they probably are Castelvetrano. So that's going. I have some basil over here. You just throw in some basil leaves and they'll just kind of give off their flavor, and you know, they kind of just wilt. I'm not even going to chop them. I'm just getting them off the stems. So
Elaine?
the flavors are amazing. I wish y'all could smell this.
Elaine?
Yeah.
It's very interesting that this is only one kind of caponata that you can find in Sicily.
In che senso? What do you mean?
Ci sono tantissime ricette di caponata in
Sì.
Sicilia.
See, this is true. Yeah, Caponata recipes are sort of hotly contested from town to town and family to family. And so this is my Caponata recipe. And I've eaten it
Lorenzo,
all for, what?
Lorenzo, per favore, turn the smell vision on.
Sorry? Okay, yeah, the smell plug-in on the computer, yeah.
So I picked out the things I like about Caponata and combined them into one. And where basically there's nothing really funky going on here. I added the cinnamon of my own. That was my own decision to do that. I think you pretty much always find these are kind of the main ingredients. And where I kind of get a little fancy is with the toppings. So we're going to mix everything in, and then it cooks down. And before you serve it, you put on some toppings. And we'll talk about that in a second. First, though, I'm going to add the raisins. You can use currants or raisins. And I have, which happens to be, to link back to our Syracuse talk, these are these little, they're not currants, they're raisins, and they're called Corinthia. And they're Corinthian raisins. They're these minute little things. And they grow in the Aeolian Islands and actually make a wine out of this. And I buy them whenever I go to Sicily because I can't find them anywhere else. And I've plumped them up in hot water so they're kind of soft. I'm going to add those. And then toasted pine nuts.
Elaine, do you toast the pine nuts ahead of time?
I did, I toasted them. Look how toasty the eggplant is getting. Can y'all see that? Look how brown and golden it is. Can y'all see?
Yum.
I like the skin to get a little crispy. And if you notice too, so could you see, I don't know if you can see this. See how the oil is pooling up? They're pretty much done. These, as my mother would say, those little devils, they are like sponges and they soak up oil, and when they're done, they spit it back out. So they're pretty much cooked. I'm gonna let it go a teeny bit more to get some more color on here, and then we'll drain them on paper towels.
So we can start contesting this recipe in the chat at this point.
You can start. Is somebody doing that? Because I can't see the chat and y'all can.
Oh, of course, we've got, yeah, that going on.
I'm going to let this go a little bit longer. I'm going to torch it again so I can get rid of some liquid because we want the tomato liquid to boil off, and then we're going to add what kind of is the key to this dish, which is this very, very ancient Greek technique of vinegar and honey. So we're going to make sweet and sour out of it. Italians do not eat sweet and sour. Sicilians do. Italians don't do that. They're just very rare.
It's not true. It's not true, Elaine.
It's rare. It's rare. You find it in.
It's not true, Elaine.
I would have been
in Tuscany,
what?
We used to make the wild boars with chocolate and
That's a good one. That's true. Never mind.
vinegar and other things.
I take it back.
Sugar. It's very strange. Okay.
That's
Sorry.
a very kind of
I think it's the last time I can show you because Elaine fired me tomorrow.
What?
You fired me tomorrow.
No, jump in. Feel free. He's right. I'm sorry. Wild boar with chocolate and vinegar. Never made it myself. Maybe we'll make that next time. I'll get Lorenzo in here. We'll do it. All right. So I have made a double recipe, and this is kind of a lot. When you do this at a time, you might just make a single. So I'm going to go ahead and add the vinegar and honey. I'm also going to take, I think these are pretty much good to go. When you're doing the eggplant, I've actually done this. I have more eggplant. I've done it in batches. You don't want to crowd them in the pan, or they just will take an hour and a half to cook. It's better to just do them in batches. And this is actually my third batch. So I did some before y'all got here. And that's my third batch. And they go a lot faster if there's not very much in the pan. So don't crowd the eggplant. turn them out on here so they can lose some of that oil. And then over here, I'm going to add our vinegar and honey. So like I said, I'm doing a double recipe. I'm going to make it kind of like a well in the middle. Most recipes call for sugar. This is another one of my things. Sugar came in with the Arabs as well. So the sugar came in with the eggplant, with the Saracens who invaded in the 9th century AD. But the Greeks who started out using the vinegar, they didn't have sugar. They had honey. So I'm using honey. And it also is a little bit healthier.
What's that red wine vinegar?
This is white wine vinegar. And you know what I love to use? If you can find it, it's really fun to use. I'm going to put a teeny bit more of this. I used to use, and I need to go get some, I need to go figure out how to order some more, mead vinegar. So honey vinegar. You ferment honey to get mead, and then you can actually turn that into vinegar.
Wow.
It's really, that is, I love vinegars. That is very
Mead.
good.
M-E-A-D. Mead vinegar. Wow. Okay.
And I can get that in Sicily, and I need to go down there and do, I have a shopping list that, so I need to go down there and fill it up. So I've mixed up, if you were using sugar, you would let the sugar dissolve. The honey, I just blended it in really well. And now I'm going to mix everything together. And it's going to continue to reduce. And when the kind of acrid aroma of the vinegar is burned off, then we're done. All right, it's still kind of burning my nostrils. I'm gonna let that go a little bit more. But see how it's kind of thickened up nicely? You don't want it to get too dry because we're about to add a large amount of eggplant. Let me get my bowl. So you mix together the whole vegetable mixture with the eggplant, and then, like I said, if you let it sit overnight or so, the flavors really come together. But I'm going to show you how to serve it because it's kind of fun. Here's the eggplant I made earlier today. I'm going to add that to my bowl. All right, I'm really happy with this. So I'm going to just add it to the bowl with the eggplant and mix everything up. And then we can plate it. I was hoping that Lorenzo could be here today to help me, and he could have helped me right now, but so I'm going to have to do this by myself.
Next time I will be here.
All right, I'll clean that out later. I'm going to get every last drop, but I'll do that off camera. So stir everything up. Oh my gosh, this is luscious. And I really made a lifetime supply here, so I'm going to put some away so I'll be able to eat it over the winter. So the topping discussion, some people put almonds on top. Some people put chocolate on top. You can put dried orange zest on top. I love all those things. Some people use cocoa in here. I don't like that. I think that muddies up the tomato flavor. So I prefer a little bit of chocolate on top. And the chocolate that I'm using comes from Modica in Sicily. And Modica was a county that was, the Spanish county of Modica in the period right when Christopher Columbus discovered the New World. So chocolate was brought directly from the old world. The Aztecs were processing chocolate, growing cocoa beans and processing chocolate. And that was brought directly into Modica in Sicily by the conquistadors. So in that period, sort of right after 1492. And they still make chocolate in the old Aztec way, which involves, here I'm getting it from Antica Dolceria Bonaiuto, great guys in Modica. It's a fun visit and amazing, amazing chocolate. And it's not tempered, so it's kind of cold process, so it's a little bit crunchy, and which is the sugar. So the sugar's not melted. So if it's not tempered, the chocolate hasn't been heated up, and so it's just pure chocolate with sugar crystals in it, and this is flavored with mandarin. So I don't even have to put in any orange zest. Although if I did put in orange zest, I would use this, which I have drying in the fireplace. I don't know if y'all might have, I'm not sure if y'all are able to see this or not. We don't have any oranges right now, of course, because it's summer. So when oranges are in season in the winter, peel off, you know how it gets twirly, the orange peel, and hang it up in the fireplace. And then you can just grate this into wherever you need some orange zest. And it's just concentrated essential oil of orange. It's so good. So I need to skip that step today because I have orange in my chocolate. So I'm going to serve this on a little Sicilian platter. And I choose to use almonds and chocolate. And it's that crunchy chocolate. So it really gives some good texture as well, as do the almonds. And you don't need to go overboard.
What was that you just put on there? Was it the nocciola or?
Almonds.
Almond.
So the chocolate, you know, a little bit goes a long way, and it's going to melt too. So this doesn't, if you're canning it, don't put this in the, you know, I wouldn't put this in the can. I do this as I serve it and just sprinkle it on top. And this is super hot right now, and it'll kind of melt a little bit. And you usually eat this room temperature or barely warm or even cold, really. It's kind of nice if the chocolate just kind of starts to melt a little bit, and then by the time you get to it to eat it, it's kind of mixed in.
So I always think of caponata as a room temperature dish, but to melt the chocolate, you'd have to have it hot like this, huh?
Right, but the chocolate doesn't really need to melt. It's not bad if it just in places kind of melts, and I prefer that it remains separate. I would not put it in. I would not melt it through there. That's the style where they add cocoa, which I don't care for. So in Elaine's caponata, there is no cocoa or whatever.
And that chocolate probably doesn't melt as like chocolate that we know.
No, it melts.
It does?
Yeah, it melts. I mean, it's not as smooth. Well, I mean, you can, if you do it really slowly, you can actually get the sugar to melt, and then it will smooth out. But the point is,
could you grate it? Could you grate that chocolate on top
yes,
of the?
you could. Actually, I am kind of disappointed that I cut such tiny pieces. I would prefer to have cut things that kind of breaks because of the sugar. There, I kind of like this size piece is good to me. So you actually, when you eat it, you actually get a piece of chocolate in your mouth. There. Okay, do y'all have any questions? Paula, your microphone's off.
Can we see it up close?
Oh, yeah. Good question. So here it is up close.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, buonissima.
Come over for supper, everybody.
Okay, now is that normally served as an appetizer or?
It can be served as an appetizer or a side dish. And I am going to have supper with some friends tonight, and we're going to have some sausages and maybe some green beans or a green salad, and that's going to be supper.
And you could put it on crostini, make a bruschetta out of it, I suppose.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Elaine, what kind of wine would you serve with that?
All right, so there's vinegar in here, right?
Oh,
so
right.
Kind of a tough one. I would go for something maybe, you know, a little sort of lighter just so that it won't clash with the vinegar. And I was thinking like a verdicchio di Matelica. And I was thinking that, I knew you were going to ask me that. And so I was, and literally it was in my head. I'm like, I'm thinking of verdicchio di Matelica. So a verdicchio di Jesi is a little bit fuller mouthed. And the verdicchio di Matelica is a little bit more minerally and direct. And I think that you have to try it, but I think that would work with the vinegar in this dish. And then, of course, as I thought about that, Eric Asimov in the New York Times published an article on Wednesday talking about verdicchio di Matelica. I was like, I'm there.
That's awesome. Nice.
That would be my choice. So,
Oh,
okay, any more questions? Y'all can feel free to email me separately. Anybody who signed up will get the recipes tomorrow. So if you didn't sign up, shoot me an email and I'll make sure I can send you the recipes. Okay.
Grazie mille.
Oh, thanks so much for coming. It was very good to see everybody finally back here in my kitchen. Stay tuned, there'll be more.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Ciao.
Grazie, Elaine.
Prego. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Mom.
Elaine.
You're welcome. Thanks to everybody for coming.
Hi, Gianna.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, Bill Fishburne.
I'm watching the numbers of participants. They're dropping off like flies.
Well, hey, George Evans.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye. You know, your brother's going to, well, I'll tell you later.
Oh, yes, please do.
Yeah, okay.
Ciao. Grazie.
Bye. Grazie mille.
Ciao,
Prego.
Paul.
Bye. Hey, Bill and Deborah, how y'all doing?
Thank you.
We enjoyed it.
Oh, there we
From New York and Arizona.
With your speech.
Thanks a lot.
We're getting some reverb. I think we may have to sign off.
Okay.
All right, I'll be in touch tomorrow. If anybody has any questions or ideas or requests even for future issues, send them on. Okay? It's good to see y'all. Hey, Fishburns, y'all keep going in and out. Eccoli, hey. Ok, Lorenzo, penso che possiamo anche.
Ok.
Ciao a tutti.
Mi
Bye.
chiami?
Ok,
Mi
faccio io.
chiami? Mi chiami?
Ok.
Ok.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Bye.